This is Khatt Chronicles. My name is Huda Smitshuijzen AbiFarès, and I have with me today Wissam Shawkat. Wissam is an Iraqi award-winning calligraphy artist and designer living and working in Dubai. He is often referred to as the self-taught master calligrapher. He has degrees in civil engineering from the University of Basra in Iraq, but has been practicing calligraphy since his teenage school days. His work is found in private collections around the world and is regularly featured in books on Arabic calligraphy and typography. He has participated as both an artist and committee member in numerous editions of local and international calligraphy exhibitions. Wissam is also known for developing a new calligraphic style that he called Al-Wissam, which references several traditional scripts, bringing them together within modern design. In recent work, he developed a new method of creating contemporary calligraphic art that he named Calligraforms, where he fuses abstract and calligraphic form to create works that challenge our expectations. Welcome, Wissam. It is really nice to have you on this podcast, and it's a pleasure to see you after not meeting in a while.
Hi. Welcome, Huda. Thanks for having me.
We've known each other for quite some time, and our friendship has only grown, and it's really nice to be able to share your work and your expertise with our audience. So welcome again.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you to just tell us very briefly your journey into becoming a designer and calligrapher, because you practice both in parallel. So we can talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll start with how I get into calligraphy, because for me first, I started with calligraphy before design. So actually, I fell in love with calligraphy when I was about 10 years old. My school teacher, he wrote on the blackboard some ruq'a script letters. It was Alif, Ba, Jim, Dal in one of the classes. And right away, I fall in love with the form that letters taking. I continued with that. I started to see my teacher ask him a lot of questions. And I remember he used to tell me about one of his best friends who used to live in Basra. And at that time, he left to Paris, Mohammed Saeed al-Saggab. And that name, since childhood, stuck with me. He always used to tell me he was a designer. He created some fonts and stuff like that. Then, during that time, I continued. There was the Iraq-Iran war and school was cut. But I continued with calligraphy, seeing my teacher. I went to high school. The same thing. Calligraphy was always there, even during the summer holidays. I never had like a normal summer holiday like the other kids. I always used to find a job in a sign making shop in my city, Basra. So I kind of practiced calligraphy. At that time, design as a term, or like graphic designer, I used to see logos or letters being created in a nice way, but I never knew there is a term as a graphic designer. Especially in Iraq, it was not really clear. I think any sign maker at that time, he's considered designer. Any painter, he's a designer. Even, like old artists in Iraq, they used to be the designers who design books or logos or whatever. So anyway, I was so good in school. I couldn't study design because we don't have that. I wanted to study architecture when I finished high school. That was also not possible because I got like 90, and the grades that put me into architecture in Baghdad, that was much higher. Then I went into civil engineering, thinking that's the closest I could be to architecture. Unfortunately, it was not. The only subject probably I loved from that was the engineering drawing. I was so good in that. I remember my professor once did a show with my drawings in the university. I used to get full marks. Then it helped me a little bit, because when I graduated, I used to teach private sessions, engineering drawing. But again, calligraphy was always there. I didn't lose it, and I continued to practice, participating in the shows. Then till I think in 1996, after my graduation, I participated in like a show in my city, Basra, and I won one of the awards in that show, because there was 3 awards. and the businessman who organized that show, he purchased all my works. That was for me probably the moment I decided, okay, I'm going to drop my engineering studies and I just going to focus on my art. After that, actually, I went into army service for 2 years. But even during the army, calligraphy helped me a lot. I mean, I used to do a lot of calligraphy for my superiors and escape, duties and stuff like that. So it was kind of okay. So I finished army. Then again in 1998, I finished the army. I got an invitation from Baghdad International Calligraphy Exhibition and participated in that show with the 3 large artworks. And I also won an award. That was probably for me the starting point, being known, I would say, a little bit internationally in 1998. And from then, I continued participating in exhibitions all around Iraq, working, with design. At the same time, because I love design, I used to draw posters. I mean, part of the job, I used to do hand posters using airbrush. That was another job I used to do, not knowing, this could be like called graphic designer, or, I used to draw letters in Arabic, not following any classical scripts, but I just enjoy creating new forms of letters. Till 2002, I decided to leave Iraq because situation was really, we knew the war was coming. And at the same time, I got an invitation from Sharjah Art Museum to participate in a calligraphy show. So I used that as an excuse to come and accompany my work. Since then, I've never been back to Iraq, and I started my work.
How easy was it to come and stay in Dubai in that time? You're talking about 2002, right? So it was a pretty long time.
Yeah, it was not easy at all. First of all, I came in a visit visa. Plus, to come from Iraq to UAE at that time, there was no, planes. So I had to come through this. So 3 days in the ship.
Wow, because I didn't realize that. It's just next door.
Yeah. It's there was like this started around the same time, the tours between Basra port and Rashid port in Dubai. And it's a ship. It's a decent ship, actually. It wasn't, but it's a 3 days trip. And especially coming, I came with no intention to come back because I came with like large 8 suitcases with everything I have, even artworks to support me in my first days. The thing that's helped me in the beginning, my brother was here, so I stayed with him a couple of weeks. Till I managed to find a job in my 3rd month in UAE. And I found a job in my 3rd month. That was in February 2003, because I came in November 2002. In February 2003, I found a job as a junior designer in a design agency.
Okay.
I took it, of course, and that helped me a lot. It made me settle. And actually, that was probably also one of the jobs that brought me further into design, understanding, the importance of being a calligrapher and how you could merge this with typography and design.
I mean, I think it's also very unique in the UAE, where you see a lot of calligraphic logos that are made. Maybe you can talk about that, because it's sort of a really nice, like, continuation. In some ways, it's like a continuation of the tradition of making figurative images with calligraphy, which comes from the calligraphic tradition. But maybe talk also about like how you approach that.
I worked as a junior designer, but because I was a calligrapher, so everything had to do with calligraphy was coming to me. And at the same time, the stuff that I was doing, other agencies, they become aware of, and I start to get a lot of freelance work. I remember even sometimes I used to, during my lunchtime, I used to leave the agency, go do another meeting in another agency, take a brief, and come back. And I used to work very hard in the first months when I was here. The thing is, at that time, logos, they were mostly, there was not really much of calligraphic logos. The most famous calligraphic logo at that time was a Jazeera channel. Everyone was referring to that. Then the next one probably...
Did you design that?
No, No,
Oh,
I did.
okay, okay.
It was already there. I mean, since
Oh.
I was in Iraq, Al Jazeera Channel logo was there. And then Emirates Airline again, that was, people consider it calligraphy. I consider it more of like a modern typography lettering
Yeah,
because it's not proper calligraphy. Then there was Burj Al Arab, the hotel.
yeah.
Burj Al Arab, I mean, no one realized it's a horrible calligraphy, actually. It's not even a calligraphy. It's a very bad calligraphy. But anyway, those were the pillars that everyone was referring to. And one of the things that I wanted to try, and actually that was how Al-Wissam calligraphy style born, because we had a project in 2004, and I was responsible for all the calligraphic designs in that project. And the brief is to create a calligraphic logo, but a bit modern, and you don't use any of the classical scripts. Classical scripts that's used mostly in logos, they were Diwani or Thuluth or Kufi. I mean, that's what you see mostly. I started from my knowledge with other scripts to create that word. It was a one-word logo. And anyway, I liked the result. However, the whole project didn't go on, and they didn't choose my option, and the whole name changed. So for me, I asked myself, okay, if I manage to create one word in a new style, can I continue? I used to get a lot of freelance. Then I started to use my freelance work as a testing ground for my new design. And I always noticed it was always pick that new design. Whenever I give options, that new design is picked. Then I continued, of course. At that time, by the way, it was not named Al-Wissam. I'll come to that later. So till 2000, I did so many projects with that new style, I would say. Of course, the new style is influenced from, I started with, I would say, a more fluid version of Eastern Kufic, merged a little bit with my knowledge of Thuluth proportions, a little bit of Jali Diwani, little bit from Sumbuli and all that. Then in 2000, I continued using it in many projects until 2010. I decided to create artworks in that style because I was happy with how the letter forms, became. And when I created some artworks, I participated in a show here in Dubai, and it was like a big hit. Some people loved it, and some people, the more classical people, they said, you cannot make something new. At the same year, I remember Munir Sha'rani saw my work, and he invited me and another artist, Tajissar Hassan, to do a show in Damascus called Calligraphic Innovations. And we went there, me, him, and Tajissar, and we had a show in a nice gallery. And it was a very successful show. I mean, the media wrote about it. After that, I continued because I felt, okay, I have something here. Let me just continue. Next year, I got an invitation from a gallery in New York to do my first solo show there. And again, I participated in many original pieces from my new secrets plus other work. And since then, it became known. The name, actually, I didn't name it. The social media, actually, in 2012, I think I had my Instagram page and started to publish my designs, my logos, my calligraphic work. And, designers and artists start using it, and they refer to it, Wissam script. And this is how the name actually came. Many times, actually, I had thought about changing the name because honestly, I don't like it, to have like Al-Wissam or, but I don't know. I think it's too late.
Well, I think it's, a lot of the Arabic scripts are not named by the people that created them. So it's kind of referred to a quality or a city or a place, some historical
or like a style.
Or like a style. But so I think it's kind of interesting. I like to discuss with you a little bit more this idea of innovation in calligraphy because, I think, you mentioned yourself, Tajissar and Munir Sha'rani, and all three of you have worked a lot in design.
Yeah.
As Munir was trained as a graphic designer.
Yeah, Munir is,
With alongside his calligraphy, Tajissar is the same. He's trained as a designer alongside with
Taj is a designer, he studied design.
So it's really interesting. I wonder whether it has something to do with the fact that we as graphic designers and designers in general are always looking for innovation, trying to create something completely new, and then still, have look for inspiration from our context and our experiences. And I wonder whether, it's no coincidence in my mind that the three of you actually also, Munir invented a few scripts all his own. So did Tajasir. So I think it's also interesting that maybe, this overlap between creative, a different mentality, but still using a craft and tradition and things. So it comes, for me, it's no surprise that the three of you invent new scripts and are innovative in the way you were. But I would love you to talk a bit more about, how you went about bringing all these scripts together.
Yeah. So now if I show you my initial, I have a good archive of actually the process. Even I have the sketches for the first logo I created. If I show you the script in the beginning and how the scripts arrive now, I mean, of course, there is a lot of evolution happen. I mean, in terms of proportions, forms, and not only three scripts. Actually, there was a new forms created all the way, because the challenge for me was, okay, the easiest part, of course, was probably to create the isolated letters. But anyway, the whole script actually, it was not created like in the normal way when we create fonts, like we create isolated letters, then connections. No, actually, it was created from making words. Then those words, I start to use them in a project. Then after years, I decided, okay, that's, I'm going to use it in art. I never sat down in the first probably 10 years to sit and say, okay, this is the alphabet and this is how they're going to connect. No, actually, it came just kind of organic. But when I created my artworks in 2010, that's where I feel, since because I created them in a classic way on the handmade paper using the same reed pens, ink, I treated them like a classical artwork, but with a new forms. I didn't do them like, filling them. No, it was just like writing them with the calligraphy pen, like I write Thuluth or Jali Diwan. So for me, letters, they start to become, more perfect for me. I start to understand. Now, how I merge all the styles, honestly, I didn't sit and decide, okay, I'm going to take this meme and make it in that way from Thuluth. It just happened on a span of 10 to 11 years organically till I was happy, but I was not happy. From 2010 till 2020, by the way, in 2020, when the lockdown happened, that probably when I was a bit happy, because I sat down and made all the connections and meshed, because I had a lot of time during the lockdown and I used that time to do that. And I published it on my Instagram. And that for me was when I had all the connections sorted out, all the, forms of letters and shapes. So it took a lot of time, of course.
You also were interested from I know from 2004, you participated in a workshop when we did the Kitabat conference in Dubai. You took a course in type design, and I think you left it and then you came back. You took some of the workshops we've done in Dubai. And so my question to you is, would you ever consider making Al-Wissam into a typeface? Because that would be really fantastic.
Yeah, I got that question a lot. My honest answer to you, no. My intention was never to make it into type. If I want to make it into type, it will lose that fluidity and because it's so complicated. I think you mentioned that. I mean, it's a complicated script. It has a lot of curves. It has a lot of, cascading, I would say. So, no, I will, unless I will do probably a version that is more, I would say, geometric baseline, that then everything is more curvy sitting on that. That's possible, but that's not my intention. I'm more into creating more new modern typefaces that probably more, I worked a little bit in type design, but not intention to do Al-Wissam into, no.
And I remember once in the workshop, you were struggling with making a typeface because it's a very different way of working than when you make, lettering in calligraphy that is
It's,
direct. And
yeah,
so, like, you described it very nicely. You think in words, in word shapes, words compositions, and then eventually you standardize from there. But I mean, in type design, it's similar, but it's even more rigid because you don't
yeah,
know what kind of words people will use. And so it's more
exactly.
difficult. But you also had to look at shapes in a different way. And then I assume that you've done more type design since, I mean, maybe custom
I did.
typefaces.
I did 5 fonts actually, 2 or 3 for clients. I mean,
Yeah.
they use them, and 2 or 3 experimental for me. I still haven't finished them. I use them personally.
Yeah.
I mean, since beginning, when I think 2004, I attended Kitabat conference and took that workshop. I became so interested in type design and typography in general, and started to read a lot. Attended Typo Berlin 5 times. Now looking at shapes, yes. I mean, for me, this is how I started to see, because I mean, you probably know better than me. Arabic typography was really, if you look at it 20 years ago from now, it was not really that evolved or developed. There was very few good typefaces. I also noticed, I mean, I asked myself that why calligraphers haven't, contributed in that. I mean, we are the people who understand letters very well. We understand proportion. But unfortunately, I discovered like most of the people who practice calligraphy, like they are very classical. They are very far from the modern world or technology. I mean, especially at that time. Now things are different. There is more people open to experiment with typography. Now, when it comes to forms, I believe calligraphers, they could, by understanding the classical scripts, they could really push the boundaries and making something new. And if you bring that into type design, and a new stuff can happen. I mean, and I think it's happening now, but not in the amount I was wishing for. I still feel there is a room for like better designs in typeface.
Yeah, I think it's also, I mean, I think you're right. And I think a lot of good type designers today do make an effort to understand and learn more about the calligraphy, and not to become good calligraphers, but to make good typography,
Yeah,
which I
you
think
don't
is
have to.
is true, because your perception of proportions is based often on your own handwriting, which might be good if you had a good teacher in school, might be terrible if you had a bad teacher in school, like a lot of people in the Arab world. So I think it's really important that, that there's a knowledge, and there is also, I think, a better maybe understanding and collaboration between the two fields nowadays than it was in 2005 when we did this Kitabat conference at the American University in Dubai. And it was the first conference also intentionally bringing calligraphers and graphic designers and typographers together.
Yes, yes.
And
It
I don't think it's been done since in the region, because I
no,
think, the problem of separating these fields, I think once in a while it's good to bring them together because they influence each other. And I think it was really interesting, to listen to calligraphers talk about calligraphy for designers, and for calligraphers to listen to designers talking about typography. Maybe we should do that again sometime.
I wish, honestly, that was the spark that I think started everything for me. I mean, I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
At the time, I was working in another branding agency, and for me, that was like an eye opener to understand, I mean, the power of, Arabic typography, which was totally ignored in the region here in the teaching, in the universities, or, that better than me.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, and from this, I want you to talk a little bit more about, your more, your work as a calligraphy artist, and your kind of like how you bring other influences. So you talked in the beginning about, doing posters with airbrush, and now you introduce this medium into calligraphy, which is calligraphic art, which is hardly near. You're the only one I know who does it.
Yeah.
And you also bring in new forms and new shapes. So you want to talk a little bit about a few of these, like ways for you that you've used kind of your graphic sensitivity
Yes.
to create new ways of approaching contemporary calligraphy?
I need to go back a little bit. So, as I mentioned before, in 1996, I participated in my first show in my city, Basra, and that was, I would say, the starting point that made me think to work as a professional artist or calligrapher. But because I was using airbrush at that time, and I was one of two probably in my whole city who know how to use airbrush, and I was self-taught in airbrush. That was a very hard thing to get, or even get the device itself. Since beginning, and I think that has to do with my primary school teacher, who was a friend of Muhammad Saeed al-Saggar. Because since beginning, even when I was learning calligraphy and starting to create, I would say, artworks, I always was doing something different. I wanted not to be classical. I don't know why, but I had always that thing inside me telling me to be an artist, you have to be different. You have to create something represent you. If someone see a piece of your work without knowing who did it, will know this is the artist who created. So that grew with me until I was in high school. I created artworks. Then in 1998 in the Baghdad International Calligraphy exhibition, I participated with the 3 artworks. They were bought by a Qatari businessman at that time, and he took them there. And they were also based on a design and airbrush and thuluth and jelly diwani. So they were not normal classical artworks. When I moved here, worked into design properly, I start to read a lot, start to read about art in general. And this is how, that for me was like an assertion that, okay, I am on the right track. I shouldn't be, just being a classical calligrapher. But what I did, which I think very few people did, I didn't want to lose that, because that will give other calligraphers, a way of saying, okay, people do modern stuff in calligraphy because they cannot really continue the classical scripts because they are very hard, they are tedious, you have a lot of time to practice. I did the opposite, actually. I focused on the classic. I won an award in classic calligraphy in Turkey. Then I created artworks that they were like perfect masterpieces. Then I decided, okay, in parallel of that, I'm going to work on my own thing. And that all happened during my creation of Al-Wissam script, during my first exhibition when I went to New York. So when I went to New York, I stayed a month there for my show, but at the same time, I attended all the, museums, MoMA, Metropolitan, whatever museum in Washington, D.C. Also, I traveled there. So I started to read more about how, art movements evolved. And I continue to, and I always noticed myself, I was always fascinated with abstraction, especially geometric abstractions, reading about cubism, how it evolved, futurism, or, the Dadaism, the work of Kurt Schwitters. Till I remember, so in 2000, I would say 12 or 13, I started to work on creating something abstract with calligraphy. I kept everything as sketches. I collect everything I have a big archive. So sketches from 2013 probably till 2014. I arrived to Calligraforms, but the name again was not there. That name, I'll come to that. So in 2014, I was scribbling on my practice sheets and wrote some letters in thuluth, probably ha or ba, I can't remember. Then I started to fill the space within the letters, make the letters solid. There is no contrast. There is no, the contrast of the content. And started to add strokes to each other and putting some letters next to each other. And I loved what was happening. And I said, okay, there's something here. I could probably evolve it more. Then I started to create more compositions. Then actually I created probably 10 or 15 shapes that in my first show in 2015 in Tashkil, I think you were there, you attended that show called Monumental 1111. I used similar shapes in many artworks. It's like I created a new alphabet made from forms of letters to create a new abstract work. Then, I started to create even more concepts. Then from our practice of calligraphy, because when we practice calligraphy, we always look, and especially if I'm talking about Uruk, because that's the more probably difficult advanced style. We write a letter and we can judge it's a good letter or bad because we look at the white of the letter, the inside of the letter, and we look at the surrounding. And from that concept, I started also to create works. I call them inside outside and so on. So from 2015, I think, till now, this is how Calligraforms started. But the name actually came in 2016 after my first show and after my second show in XVA gallery called Inside Outside. We had between those a show in 2016, me and my friend, the artist Majid Al-Yusuf, because he also worked in similar, I would say, thing, but with his own style. So we did a show together called Contours in a Circle Avenue about that, our new work. But again, we didn't call it, Calligraforms. But I remember in 2016, I was, that was not an intentional to have a name, but, it's a modern work. But I remember one day I was going to sleep and I was about to put my head on the pillow. The word calligraphy and form just came together and like Calligraforms, and I loved it. And I remember I went back to my studio to write it down so I don't forget the next morning. Then, I remember, so the date of that, I announced it on Instagram. So I remember next morning I posted something and I mentioned, so I'm deciding to call this style Calligraform, and the movement, we called it Calligraformism. And since then.
That's really nice that it comes, like, I think it's interesting to listen to you talk about how the process kind of takes over and finally it becomes so solidified or like has a strict personality, and then you have to name it. And, the name is always the challenge, but you always have very good names. I also like your other work that you call Callicubism.
Calligraphic cubism,
Graphic cubism.
Which is part of Calligraforms, by the way. So within Calligraforms, I have 5 or 6 different styles influenced from different movements. But calligraphic cubism, of course, I mean, the name is very clear. I love cubism, probably is the most influential movement, I think, not only on me, on the whole art world.
But also, I think I find that it's really nice to listen to you talk about like some of the classical traditions or classical ways of looking at letters and how you can take these concepts and make something completely modern with it. This is like really very commendable, and, it touches my heart personally, because I think it makes the whole tradition of calligraphy and Arab Islamic arts in an academic context, they have they almost sound like they ended in the 19th century. But with your work and probably other people as well, you see that they are still alive, and there's a lot of room for innovation from within the tradition without having to kind of completely throw it out of the window. I think this is really very nice to listen to and to see hopefully more and more calligraphers working in this way. I want to ask you if you have a project like that really for you was very important, that you really loved working on, or that was completely challenging, or both.
I would say there's 2 projects that I really love. They are close to me because in terms of size, maybe, I think, are we talking about projects? Could be any project, not necessarily a logo or an artwork. So there is 2 projects. One of them I did in 2012 in Doha, in the Hamad International Airport, in the Emiri terminal, unfortunately. So people don't see it, but it's my biggest project till now. So it's designing a 300-meter glass panels on both sides of a bridge that leads to the Emiri terminal. So I was selected to design that. So I went there and met, and I created a concept from using thuluth. But again, I didn't use, I mean, I have photos and stuff, never published a lot of that, but I created a story. So I got influenced by the look of the old dhows and Doha skyline, how, the fronts of the dhows, on the shore. I created like a booklet of a story and used certain letters, the word Doha within, and created a design that's a bit modern, but using just the classical letters of thuluth. Then the execution of that was actually really nice because we executed by sandblasting on 2 centimeter glass panels, 1 meter height. Imagine you have 2 bridges, so 300 meters on the side of the bridge. And there was an Italian company who designed the LED lighting to lit that panels from beneath. So, when you have a cut in a glass and there is a lighting, it will show all the edges. So that's what happened. So now at night, the colors change. So imagine you go through that bridge and you see that color change on both sides of the bridge. It was beautiful. Unfortunately, when we finished the project, and because it was an airport and it's the Amiri terminal, there was a lot of, security passes. So I saw it for the final time when I went for the final approval of everything. Then I left and actually couldn't see it again. The other one is in 2020, in Dubai Expo. I was working with Tashkil on the Enoch Pavilion. And I created in Calligraforms. So that was the first time I used Calligraforms in a public space. There was like a balustrade stairs around the building, and I created Calligraforms based on a story, certain words. I created them in shapes, and it was run all around, like in a spiral way around the building.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Probably you saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and I like you said, I immediately knew it was your work.
Yeah.
I was like, if it wasn't his work, then somebody was really copying you. But that's good.
Yeah, cool. I mean, copy of Calligraforms, there is a lot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, it's a kind of compliment in some ways. Painful, but it's a compliment. I think it's interesting you mentioned, I like this idea of creating a whole landscape with calligraphy. And I was wondering, how do you choose the texts, or are these also sometimes given, or do you choose the text yourself? Because you need the text, even though you may not be able to read it, you still need something to start from.
So for that project, actually, no, I didn't choose. I choose the word Doha because I was commissioned to do this art. So I wanted to keep it abstract because keep in mind, people will pass this bridge in a speeding car. I mean, they can't read actually anything. But I kept the word Doha within the design because it's there. I mean, even if you can't read it. But the rest...
It's an outdoor thing. It's not inside.
No, it's an outdoor. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's an outdoor. So imagine there is 2 smaller bridges.
Yeah.
And on both sides of this bridge, if you are going back or coming, there is like a glass,
Yeah. Like
a barrier. Yeah, exactly. But text for my work, if I talk about other works, sometimes I use text mostly in my art pieces. But even in Calligraforms, there is a lot of pieces I don't use. I just keep letters abstract.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always like a question that comes up because when you see letters, people say, can you read it? And sometimes you can't, and it's not
I'm
the point.
against that, actually.
Yeah,
I'm totally against.
Like, just look at it as form. Read with
exactly.
your eyes.
I mean, that's the idea of appreciation. I mean, Calligraforms actually was born from looking at people, even because I did it in a way that I don't want only Arab people to appreciate it. Although, I mean, most of people who appreciate it, they are actually not Arab because probably they understand abstract art more, or, they love, because I notice all over the years, Arabic non-speakers who look at my calligraphy work, the classic work, they appreciate it still because they look at it as abstract forms. And that's exactly how I thought about it when I created Calligraforms.
Yeah, but it's often difficult if you can read it, not to want to read it. That's always the problem. You cannot unread it. That's a bit the problem. So I think when you push it so far, like in Calligraforms, it's very clear you can't read it, so you stop. You don't even try, and then everybody is kind of on the equal footing.
Just enjoy the form.
Yeah. What would you give as advice to young designers or calligraphers or both? What would be your advice from your experience? How many years you've been working now for? Like 30 years or so? More or your life?
Like more than so if I calculate 1996 as my first, before 1996 I was working even in university or high school. I used to design logos for my friend. So if we calculate since the beginning when I was 10, then it will be exactly 40 years working in the art of calligraphy or letter making or whatever you call it. As an advice, I always get asked this through people ask me on Instagram or on Facebook. I'm a new designer. What do you advise me? Honestly, for the new generation now, it's very tough and it's very easy at the same time. Why it's tough? Because there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of material and media that you could see, and you can hardly know what is the good, what is the bad, what I should learn from, and is this true? Is this bad? In our days, there was no material. There was nothing. We had actually to really invent, and I think that's probably to do with the way I grew up in a very difficult time, in wars, even when I was in shelters, when I was a kid in underground shelter, I used to practice calligraphy because there was nothing to do as a kid. So if you ask me, now there is everything, resources, just type on internet, you get hundreds of books about calligraphy or typography or whatever. But now because there is a lot of material to grasp all that, is not really easy. So my advice is really try just to take what you do seriously, because that's what I did. You really have to take it seriously, which unfortunately in the new generation now, not all of them, of course, but I see people really, they don't take their work seriously. And by saying that, I've noticed why people copy other people's work, or they go on probably Pinterest or Instagram to find work and copy it, because they are not really taking what they do seriously. So take your work seriously, work hard, pick maybe a couple of good designers to follow, read about their story, how they arrived to that, and try to apply that to yourself. But again, I don't think it's really easy because the distractions nowadays is a lot.
What is your favorite book? Like, tell people that they should read.
About design or calligraphy in general?
Yeah. Or both. Like the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't think too hard about it.
Okay. The History of Arabic Type by Huda.
That's an excellent book. Excellent.
Yeah. By the way, I forgot to mention something about that book. It's related to so when I came to UAE, I love books. And before I start having my job, I was spending from what I brought with me, which was very little. But I remember I went once with my brother to Al-Magrudi bookshop in Dira City Center. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I went there. That was 2002. I still haven't worked yet. I saw your book there.
It was just published in 2000.
It was just, It was 2000. Yeah, it wasn't new. So I remember I bought it, and my brother told me, "Wissam, what are you doing? Like, you're spending your money on books, and you still even didn't work." I told him, "No, I have to have this book. I really need. This is interesting for me." So I bought that book, and I still have it actually.
Yeah, I had to make a new version of it at some point, but I have
the new version as well. I got the new version.
It's not very different from the old one, but because I thought, yeah, it's a historical document. You should not.
But yeah, that was for me the first book I was reading is that tells, history about the subject, because honestly, I did not know anything about the subject of type design or fonts or whatever.
Yeah.
So
it is still, I think, valid document.
Yeah.
Also still a very good way of introduction into the field and knowing the history and connection between, technology and politics and whatever, and how fonts come about. And of course, it's concise, so it had, But for me, it's interesting. The book was also a kind of learning thing because precisely like you said, there was nothing and I wanted to learn about it because I was teaching. So I just did the research and there's the result.
I remember I attended once a talk by you. You were talking about that and how you created the book.
Yeah. So Wissam, this was really lovely talking to you. I think it was really inspiring to dig deep into your work and your thinking. And I find that the conversation about innovation within calligraphy and the kind of interchange between calligraphy and design is really an important conversation. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I look forward to seeing you in person sometimes in the very near future.
Thank you, Huda. Thanks so much. I was honored to talk to you.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. Thank you for our audiences for listening to this conversation.